My friends, this is the playbook. Imagine that there's a digital network, and we know that customer acquisition cost scales linearly. The long-term value of each customer joining the network, each user on the network, scales exponentially if you assume that users actively know this to be true. As that network grows in value, I propose we can distribute this value to the form of all the participants on the network. I'd like to tell you that when it comes to value, typically there are two components to value. There's intrinsic and extrinsic value. These are my personal notes. I'm just going through what I have here. In the early days of PayPal, the way that they got people on PayPal was to promise them money. It's better to be the last mover in a space than it is the first mover. And one of the key challenges at PayPal was to try to eliminate fraud. Well, by the way, I'd like to propose the intrinsic and extrinsic value while we come back to that. The thing about intrinsic value is that it's baked into the value of something. Like if we're thinking about something like the value proposition of Bitcoin, the network, I would say one component of the value is real value where people are using it for money and exchange of goods and services, this kind of thing on some basis. And some people are also using it for some kinds of specific investments. Some people are using it as more of a speculative investment, which I would consider to be an extrinsic value. So basically that's like the guesswork of a valuation. That's to say, what could the future value be? It's interesting to think about this kind of concept when it comes to options, things like this. Another concept I'd like to talk about is one thing that arose at the same time Bitcoin did was kind of this concept of trust minimization and data permanence. If we think of Bitcoin as a trusted chain of history, it is a trusted data source, and we have the ability to inject other data into this chain. And this is pretty much sufficient trust minimization. It's basically like humanity's best way to store data. And that is true because of the level of decentralization and data redundancy that it offers. And when it comes to selecting any kind of data, we can take Web 2 data, for example, like if we're talking about NFTs or anything else, and just imprint it into any kind of protocol and then push it right into Bitcoin. And what I'm proposing is possible is we could just do this with arbitrary data, and we can take any kind of data and put it in kind of humanity's strongest database in the form of Bitcoin. I would also like to take a moment, this looks crazy, but it looks like a magic spell or something. Imagine this is your social graph. Imagine this little dot in the middle is you, and these are your friends, and you go out, maybe you talk to this guy regularly, you talk to this guy all the time, this guy all the time, and this is the same thing over here. All of these are real people that are connected. Let's imagine for a second that we can also see how much money is in their pockets. We had another way to visualize this network. So you'd say, oh, these are three guys that are pretty well connected. Well, now what if I ask you, which one of these two charts demonstrates, which one of like these collections of nodes might demonstrate a bot? Like let's say these are Bitcoins in people's wallets and there's suspicious behavior on chain. Like which one might be a bot? Well, hard to tell with just the information here, but if you're just going to guess, I would guess that the one with more Bitcoin in their wallet is probably the human in general. I mean, unless it's something that's robotic, and in which case we're using some other kind of data to validate this information. So I'm suggesting with the trifecta of the peers and the monetization and the data that comes with accountability and attestations about these accounts, then you are able to summarize like relationships in a sufficiently rich way to identify and interact with peers in arbitrary ways, I should say. Just thinking about money broadly. I was listening to Dr. David Graeber last night, some of his talks, and it just had me thinking, money is credit, is social credit. You know, you trust your friends all the time to pick up favors interchangeably, atomically. It's hard to extend that to a credit system, you know, because it has a more rigid protocol-like framework, and then it's harder to extend that to the money system because it is under a governed framework of bureaucracy as well. In any case, and then I'm proposing, what if there were a money supply that just inflated at 3% over time? That would be a pretty interesting idea. Like you could tie it to epoch time. For those of you that don't know, that is like a permanent point in time. It's used in computer languages. It's like Unix time, and it was 19-2 back in the day. Everybody knows what day it is other than me. And then what if you just distributed this token to everybody in society pretty equally. So like, what if you just had a money supply that printed to everybody equally and made everybody rich? Like literally just gave everybody 1 million tokens. Interesting idea. Well, if we did that, the wealth curve of society, whatever it looks like, would just go up. I propose it would just kind of enrich everybody. Particularly, like, what would be the best way to do this? I mean, I propose if you're going to do it with everybody, you might as well do it with Bitcoin. So if you're going to just pay everybody in the world, you should pay them Bitcoin, because then no governments can block it. Hopefully that person has a secure way to access their account, this kind of thing. So what I'm basically proposing that we do is, I have this like light client. I think basically Bitcoin's economic security is computationally intensive, but we can connect light clients to connect to each other and test as peers with rich data to solve like the social graph problem with this attestation. I just say, if you open this website, the idea is you have this website, you check in with your friends, in real life you get paid. We take the value of Bitcoin, we distribute a token to everybody over time, including some bots, and we'll deal with them later. We'll talk about proving later, but that's the general idea. There's a set inflation rate and just enriches the masses. And let's talk about web of trust. It's the idea that you and your peers, like over time, like you can kind of track the value of these relationships. And in a situation where like maybe your cluster of friends and your neighborhood's cluster of friends is together, like you could maybe incentivize like nearby peers or like, you know, strong peers in between to do attestations, like such that you can basically build this network to and pay people more to meet new friends. And it works. It like, that's what the people need. And that's fun. Cool. So I'm proposing basically it's not too soon to just make this promise. I'm going to throw the MVP and just make it all centralized for now. We can build towards decentralization, but basically on the mobile client, it'll just start generating tokens. At some point, we'll add cash out to whatever token is on some other network, or we'll just go straight onto Babylon and build our own chain. And then I propose basically like over time, you know, your account will be active by default, great. And then every once in a while, you got to check in with your friends to kind of like renew the session. And no worries, like if you break your account, like the whole cool part about your web of trust is that you can recover the keys. Like, you know, you go back to your friends and they can help you recover your account. And another interesting thing about that is you can monetize it. And like when you can visualize your web of trust, something more like this, then it's easy for you to pick friends that you want to entrust with your account, right? But yeah, I'll let my buddy Eric rent my Porsche. Blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so we'll pay people today, and then we'll prune the web of trust from the bots later. Like, we'll just let off-chain analytics handle the identification and slashing of bots on the network. So I propose Bitcoin-backed economics, and then we'll have them staked through some kind of protocol. And with strong form identity, we enable zero knowledge, like voting, this kind of thing. So the cool thing, yeah, so we'll build it centralized, and then we'll figure out what we need, basically. And whether we build on Solana or Babylon, whatever, we'll figure out what we need, and then we'll build that into a trust minimized version that is on something else. So that's where we're at. Cheers. So still working on it.